Badiucao, welcome to Quicktake, and thanks for being here. We're going to get to your latest work in a moment, but I want to start on you. You've been compared to Banksy for a couple of reasons. You've chosen to work under a pseudonym in the past, and you used to wear a mask when you were working. Why did you decide to change that and show the world what you look like?
Well, I'm very happy to be here and talking to everyone. I've been making art for quite a long time, about 10, 11 years. But I know that if I want to use my art to focus on the human rights record, especially the human rights record in China, then automatically I'll be subject to all kinds of threats. So I choose to be anonymous from the very beginning of my art career, just so that the Chinese government do not know who I am and they cannot harm me or hunting my family. However, it's always very hard to completely be invisible online. And also, it is extremely hard if you want to do it as an artist, because an artist requires a lot of interaction with real people in the real space, with real action. So in 2018, the Chinese government, probably the National Security Police, breached my identity and find out who I am. And they fully strike on me and threatened my family just 3 days before my Hong Kong solo exhibition in 2018. So after that, it is not just a threat to my exhibition, but it's also posed a kind of existential question, because the Chinese government want me to stop making art. Mm-hmm. They're saying, we know who you are. We're going to publish everything. We're going to harass your family unless you stop making art and cancel this exhibition. But for me, making art is so important that it's a part of my identity. And being an artist, meaning being free on what I want to create, especially on those important issues. So after that incident, I decided to reveal my face and identity. I don't want the Chinese government to hold that as some kind of control elements, so over me. Yeah. And that's why now I want to show my face because I don't want to compromise myself.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that you've said in the past that political cartooning, which is what you started off doing, is more about starting a conversation rather than changing people's minds outright. So you have published this collection of NFTs on the 2022 Olympics. What's the specific conversation that you're starting with this collection, and who are you having this conversation with?
Well, for this object or for this project, it has two dimensions. Firstly, obviously, it is the art itself. It's this 5 design of posters that using the Winter Olympic game as a metaphor to showing 5 different human rights violations from the Chinese government. In those designs, you see, athletes actually wearing the Chinese national flag representing actually the Chinese government, pushing down as a hockey player to the Tibetan community. You see execution look like seeing that against the Uyghur community, indicating the ongoing genocide which is happening in Xinjiang region. You also see that there is the flower, the city flower of Hong Kong, being sliced on the surface of ice by an ice skater. There are images about China's total dictatorship with this new digital spin when I show a snowboard is surfing on top of a surveillance camera. So all of those very important topics are discussed within this group of artworks. Yeah. And we shouldn't also forget that I have this post talking about China's early censorship on the information of COVID, which probably causing this local outbreak become a global pandemic. Right. Finally, kills so many people, and now we are still suffering from it. All those issues is something that we have to consider when we are watching or thinking about this Olympic that will be hosted tomorrow in Beijing.
Who is that? Who are you having this conversation with, though? Is it directed at Beijing? Is it directed at athletes, at countries that are participating? Because I know you are calling for the boycott of the Olympics, but they're going to take place as scheduled.
Well, I think it's always about talking to the general public. I think there has been a lot of action spinning and taking from the government side for many countries, including America, Australia. There are diplomatic boycotting has been in place, but how much the general public really understand and acknowledge it enough to be aligned with those decisions is also the key if this boycott or the protest will be meaningful in the long term. Mm-hmm. So I think for artists that's how we can bridging this message and using a very influential form of visual art to actually communicate with general public. And also I think the reason to choose NFT is also, I believe, now we all say the world is flat, but we're also kind of caged into different realms of communities. Sometimes you just have to use one community's language in order to talking to those people. So for this case, using NFT is my way to getting into the cryptocurrency world, to get into this very active community and telling them what is happening in China and let them to understand and reflecting the situation, which they might not have a chance to think about it before because there hasn't been any artists doing political art about China with this very high profile action.
Right, making sure the crypto bros are aware, of course. I want to talk about the situation in Australia. Peng Shuai, in particular, the professional tennis player who accused a top political official of coercing her into a sexual relationship. Shirts with the slogan "Where's Peng Shuai" were banned from the Australian Open briefly. I wonder to what extent this kind of all mirrors a conundrum for sports organizations over, what degree to which they should get involved in policing protests and who has the responsibility of that? Is it the IOC?
Well, for the Australia case, I do think it is such a shame that in the beginning, AO, the Australian Open people, is trying to forbid it. And I think it's a good decision. Finally, they revoked this decision, allowing the T-shirt of "Where's Peng Shuai" being taken away into the play court. Well, I have to point out that, AO has some very significant Chinese sponsor. And when we're talking about sports, it's always also about money. It's about advertisement. And because of this connection, and if it has anything to do with China, then suddenly you will find those organizations compromise and are not really reflecting the value they advocated for so long. And it's this very same situation happening in IOC as well, that we see IOC played a very despicable role, particularly on the Peng Shuai's case, because they actually collaborated or listened to the Chinese government and putting this fake show to trying to kind of whitewashing the situation of Peng Shuai and to show the world that she's actually okay. But we all know that so far she hasn't been able to, really speaking freely with her will. Every organization of interview is carefully controlled and in a maintained situation under the watch by the Chinese government. So IOC definitely have a responsibility to talking about those very important issues in China, because like I said, I do not just believe sports is something for entertaining or making money. We watch the sports because we see our humanity within those athletes competing, because it's supposed to celebrating the best of us instead of throwing those very important values just because they want to earn money in China.
Sure. And in our final minute here, I know you mentioned the format of NFTs was a move to make sure this topic was addressed within the cryptocurrency community. I wonder, was it also a move to potentially move past galleries? And if that was the case, which galleries have you found to be the most supportive? And have you found more support in the West, for example?
Well, you're talking about something that, really troubles me and make me feel sad all the time. Exactly. In the conventional physical world, my exhibition and art constantly being censored and rejected by galleries and the museums. Most of the time, those institutions would just reject me because they're worrying about China's censorship. And even recently, when I have this Italian exhibition in Brescia, the local government, the local mayor received this threatening letter from the Chinese embassy in Rome, as well as the St. Julian Museum, the Brescia Museum Foundation received this threat. But this time, they really did a great job to supporting my core and stand with the rights of free speech of mine. But I cannot really continue on that because it's such a rare case. But for NFT, I certainly do not have those issues. I have a platform instantly that without worrying about censorship. And also, more importantly, those artwork is going to survive on the blockchain for a much longer time in a much safer environment. And I do think NFT has this great potential, not just for showing the new form of ownership of digital art, but also defending the rights of digital artists and allowing more artists like me focus on the human rights issues and political issues to have a safe and free environment to talking about those things without being worried of censorship or harassment.
I want to go back to the point that you made about how some galleries may be fearful of offending China, particularly their business opportunities there. It touches on this idea that business trumps everything. But China's response to all these concerns that there's genocide happening in Xinjiang, for instance, and I'm not defending China, I'm just saying its response would be, well, this is a domestic issue. The U.S. also has domestic genocide as well. Does it surprise you that this Xinjiang genocide has taken off the way it has when there are so many issues within U.S. borders or elsewhere in other countries that also have their own domestic issues?
Well, I think argument like this is a typical whataboutism that we all know. It's very important that we hold all human rights violation equally, and we equally criticize all of them. I never shy on criticizing the American issues as well. I made cartoon about the migrant situation or illegal migrant situation in America. But on the other hand, that's not the reason I would stop, criticizing the Chinese government's human rights violation. I think it's very important that we hold human rights as a universal value, which means that every individual should have the right to see, understand, and also criticize wherever if there is unfair and injustice situation happens. This is not the reason that we remain silent on different cases. This is actually a core for all of us to criticize the human rights problems wherever it is.
Yeah, and I go back to what you're saying about the Olympics as a celebration of the human spirit, of what it can do, of human achievement, really, Maddie.
Yeah, absolutely, and less of a celebration of nationalism. Badiucao, final question for you. How are you going to be watching the Olympics this year?
Well, as an artist, that I will have to follow the news and reflecting those very important moments with my art. But I don't think I will really enjoy any minutes of it, because for me, this is a very problematic, Olympic. This Olympic is actually soaked in a lot of people's tear and blood from China. So this will also be my message to the audience that while you're watching the Olympic Games in Beijing, it is also an excellent opportunity for you to learn more about the other side of China, those sides that the Chinese government try to hide with their best effort is exactly the thing that will concern us much longer than just this game, but in the longer term for our own rights.
The games that only last 2 weeks, but the situations that have gone on for decades. Badiucao, thank you so much for joining us.